What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Unstoppable Dad Project. Thank you for joining us. If you're returning, if you are a new listener, welcome. Hope you find some value from what we do here. So this week, I want to do a relatively quick podcast and talk about not overcomplicating things. And I'm going to kind of speak specifically to training because that's obviously my area of expertise. And overcomplicating things is something that I see an awful lot of people do when it comes to their training. And most specifically, something that I see dads do. And not just dads, but dads who at some point have prioritized their training, whether it be due to an athletic endeavor that they're doing, or it just be that they're, an old school gym rat and they've done that in the past. And then kids come along, time constraints get shortened, and we start to lose time that we would generally put into going to the gym or prioritizing our health. And what happens then is, by overcomplicating things, trying to get back to where we were and having all these extra thoughts in our mind of how short we are from where we want to be, it becomes a process that just gets put in the too hard basket and no action gets taken. And we can look at the overcomplication of training on so many levels. When it comes to working with people, one thing that I always talk to them about is we've got to understand what their goals are. And we've spoken about this quite a number of times in a whole bunch of different podcasts. And this podcast is kind of in the same vein of the episode we did on progress over perfection, in the fact that doing something is going to be better than doing nothing. And all too often when we overcomplicate things, what tends to happen is we end up doing nothing because it gets too hard to think about it. As dads, as parents, as husbands, fathers, partners, whatever position you're in, we've got so many other things that we've got to think about on a daily basis that when it starts to coming to just firstly having the time to train, but then also what we are going to do with their training, if we spend too much time overcomplicating it, trying to do the biggest and best things that we see on the latest Instagram influencers post, or we see this guy over here who's fucking balancing on a Bosu ball with a barbell over his head doing overhead squats. We can talk about overcomplicating it from the complexity of the movements that we're doing, and then also overcomplicating it from the complexity of the plan that we're trying to implement. And if we do that and we try and overcomplicate it too much, what then happens is inaction. We don't actually take action and we don't move forward or move closer to what we want to achieve. So from the point of view of not overcomplicating it, there are a few pretty simple steps that you need to take to make sure that you are not overcomplicating what you are doing within your training. And number one is know what you want to get out of your training. Most of the people that I deal with, whether it's within the gym environment or it's within the Unstoppable Dad Project, they are just simply trying to be more functional and be the best version of themselves here and now. Now, that version of yourself here and now cannot be compared to a previous version of yourself. It may end up being that the version of where you are now may be the same or better in particular context as to where you are, or it may be that it's completely different. And that's obviously going to depend on what your point of reference is from your past and what your set of circumstances is now. But I can tell you as a rule that a lot of people that I deal with want to get back to a point, to something they were in their past where their circumstances are at completely opposite ends of the spectrum. And I'm here to tell you that if you go into it with the same plan, but you have different circumstances, kids, different job, and all these other commitments that maybe you didn't have at that previous time in your life, you are setting yourself up for failure. So understanding where you want to be here and now and your reason for wanting to do that. And as I said, for the vast majority of people that I'm dealing with, it's literally to be more functional and to be a better role model for their kids, to be the healthiest version of themselves, be able to move better, be able to get stronger. And there's a whole lot of kind of subsets of goals in there, but there to start off with. And they are relatively simple goals to achieve, even though we may think they are very, very hard. And this is what I'm talking about of overcomplicating it. And when we need, and then from there, once you understand that, you can start to work out a plan on where you want to go. Now, if you are training for general health and wellness, you probably only need to look at training about 3 hours a week. Now, that doesn't mean that you can train more if you have the availability to, but for a lot of people that have families or intense jobs or both, 3 hours a week can be a bit of a stretch, especially if you're not doing it right now. But doing 3 hours a week and then adding in things like walks and quite simple things for you to do, trying to be active with the kids, taking them down to the park, running around with them, but doing kind of 3 hours of structured training a week is generally enough for you to start moving the needle in the right direction. And all too often we get this in our head that we need to be at the gym 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a week. And if we're not going to get results. Well, firstly, you need to understand what it is, your overarching reason why, and then you can start to refine some results from there. But understanding that, and then if you are just training for general health and well-being, allocating 3 hours a week for you to spend some time on yourself to better yourself physically is really all you need. And doing a combination of strength training, I think if you are, let's say you may only have 2 hours a week to actually get to the gym, but then you can do like, you might be able to go for a run or walk or things like that, where like the travel time doesn't need to be factored into it. But if you were doing 2 hours of strength training a week, and then you were doing another hour to 2 hours cumulative over the rest of the week of kind of steady state cardio, you will find that if you stick to that and you're consistent with that for a 6 or 12-month period, your strength levels will be in a completely different place to what they are now. And not only that, probably your physical appearance, your body composition, if that stuff is important to you, is probably going to be in a different spot as well. And that's literally only using 3 to 4 hours a week to try and move things in the right direction. Whereas if you try and overcomplicate, you're trying to find 6 to 8 to 10 hours a week to allocate to your training, it's just going to be too much. And sticking to old plans or trying to build out or stick to plans that are designed to have that time constraint in mind is not going to be conducive to where you are right now. So thing number one is understand what you want to do this for, like the overriding reason. As I said, this conversation is designed more for those people that want to just have some balance in their life, be more physically capable, try and raise their base level of strength and be more active, be a better role model for their kids, and just prioritize a little bit of time for themselves. And then don't overcomplicate it with the time that you need to do it. Like I said, for a lot of people, 3 hours a week of dedicated training time in the gym is enough. And then doing some other stuff out there where it's just being active, going for walks, all that type of stuff is great. You don't need to spend 5 or 6 hours in the week. In fact, that can start to work in the opposite direction for you, where you're potentially not recovering properly, especially if you're not getting adequate sleep, which is something we know as parents, especially new parents, is a big deal. I did an episode on sleep the other week. So if you want to know a little bit about some things that you can do to kind of help you sleep, you can go back and listen to that. But sleep's probably not right. Maybe nutritional intake isn't where it needs to be to kind of enhance recovery. So, doing that 3 hours a week of structured training is probably just enough to keep your body physically active without having the adverse effects of doing too much training because you're under recovering too much. So that for a lot of people is sustainable, and it's something that it's actually a stretch for a lot of people to try and do. Now, from the actual mechanics of the training program, you don't want to overcomplicate this too much. Obviously, I'm a coach, I'm a personal trainer, and this is what I've done for the last 10 years. And I believe that if you are at a point where you are struggling to think about all these things you need to do, employing somebody to help you with a plan is going to be the best thing you can do to move the needle forward. And this is still not overcomplicating, right? But employing somebody that not only that understands your particular set of circumstances and the goal that you want to achieve. Not just going and signing up to something online because it's cheap, like $9 a week from a guy that has a six pack, that hasn't had any kids in his life and expects you to train 6 days a week, because that might work for the short term, but it's also not potentially conducive with your lifestyle, one, and your goals that you're trying to achieve, two. But somebody who is aligned with what you want to achieve. And if that is general health and well-being, somebody that kind of talks to you about training 2 to 3 times a week and just getting some other activity in outside of that is probably the best way to go. And I prioritize strength training. I think for when people the majority of the people that we deal with are 30, 35, 40 plus. Once you get to that age group, if you only have, say, 2 hours a week to train, I would just prioritize strength training, and even do it as you could do a lower body and an upper body split. You're probably going to do 4 to 6 movements in each of the sessions. If you're constrained on time, one thing that I do within a lot of our programs is superset movements. So we do a lot of compound lifts where, multi-joint, multi-muscular, to try and get a little bit more bang for your buck rather than isolation movements. But the way we generally structure our programs is we will do like a primary lift. So say, for example, on day 1 of our program, it would be like a squat, and then we'll superset that with an accessory lift. It may be like a midline strength work where we're kind of doing, for example, like a plank or a side bridge, teapots, something like that. So during your rest periods, you're going to be able to do a superset during your other, and then from there, we'll move into another movement where we're probably doing a primary movement. So if we were doing a squat, we're maybe doing something a little bit more dynamic, like a single leg deal, a dynamic step up or something like that. And then supersetting that with maybe a little bit more targeted work. And then depending on how the session timing runs, we're aiming for about 60 minutes start to finish warm up, do section 1, do section 2. We've done 4 movements. Sometimes we're doing a few more, but 4 to 6 movements per session. We do that for lower body day 1. And then day 2, you're doing like an upper body split. And then if you have more time to do it, if you have an extra day to go in, you can add other stuff in. But generally, we're using that same kind of structure on the way through. But we're not overcomplicating it. We're not trying to do the world's most jiggy movements or the latest thing that comes out. It's simple, effective movements that you don't have to think a lot about. Because if you are mentally fried, if you are at a point where like, I've just got to do this because I know I have to. You don't want to have to think about little technical points all the way through as you're training, because firstly, that's going to make you not enjoy it. And secondly, if you strap the time, having to do long, extensive warm-ups where you're thinking about movements that have a highly technical element to it is just going to make your session go longer and longer. So doing quite simple compound movements, 4 to 6 movements per session, a brief warm up beforehand just to get the heart rate going, get the blood flowing, and start to prep those movement patterns is really a good, simple plan for what you do. And that's kind of how we structure most of our programs. So, by not overcomplicating it, there's probably 3 main things that you need to look at. You need to make sure you understand the reason why you're training. And for a lot of people, and the people that this podcast is probably targeted to, it's general health and well-being. It's trying to be the fittest and the strongest version of yourself right now so that you can be a good role model for your family, for your kids, and for your community. Once you've understood that, it's then making sure that you are working towards a plan which is going to work within your lifestyle. Not overcomplicating it, trying to get 6 to 8 hours of structured training in a week. Generally, that 3 hours a week of structured training is enough for most people to move the needle forward, which in the big scheme of things is 100% not a massive time commitment. 3 hours over the course of the week is fuck all. And if that may mean for some of you, rather than going to a gym, maybe you need to look at potentially setting up your little home gym for yourself. making an investment in that if you can, because then that takes out those time constraints even more. It means that you don't have to worry about travel time to and from the gym. If you're going to a gym, try and keep it close to home, because again, if you're really feeling like you're strapped for time to do these things for yourself, you need to set these behaviors up so that there's not so many roadblocks in between. Which leads me into the third point, which I think is really important for a lot of people, and especially a lot of men, when in the past we've kind of done our own programs and we've done our thing, whether they're good or bad. I've done some of my own programs in the past as I was younger and coming up, and I can tell you now, looking back on them, doing the programming for myself was complete garbage, complete dog shit earlier on. But whether it's your own thing or not, don't overcomplicate it. Try and keep the movement simple. Try and maximize the time that you're in the gym by doing things like supersets. And if you struggle to do that, if you're the type of person that walks into a gym, kind of looks around and makes it up on the spot, I'd strongly recommend just investing in a program. I'll go on the sales pitch here. Our program at the moment, it's $49 a month. Okay. And it's structured similar way to what we did. What we do is we actually have 2 mandatory days. So it's minimum 2 hours for those training sessions. And then we have optional days outside of that, covering off extra strength, extra aerobic work, and things like that. So, and then we have some at-home bodyweight programs included in the at-home, the Unstoppable Dad project. So if you can't get into the gym, you have the option to do it at home, bodyweight in the backyard, about 30 minutes to get those done. So we try and make it flexible and adaptable. And that's one thing that I've become very good at over the last 10 years, dealing with all the people I have, as well as the circumstances that I've had to particularly go through with owning a business, having kids, and wanting to do other stuff. So having this adaptable, flexible plan where there's a minimum that you need to do. For us, it's that 2 to 3 hours a week. And then on the weeks that you can push a little bit harder. But as long as you get that minimum done, that 2 to 3 hours, for a lot of us, if you can stick to that for a 6 to 12 to 18 month period, you are 100% going to be in a better spot than what you are now. So don't overcomplicate it. Start to move everything forward. Keep the movement simple. Know why it is that you want to train, because that will be very different to why you will potentially training in your younger years. And get yourself a plan if you're struggling with it. They're the things that I would do if you're finding it hard to get back into some form of physical training. Don't overcomplicate it. Keep it moving forward. So if you've got all the way through to the end, well done. Went a little bit longer than what I thought it was going to. Please like, share, subscribe on all the podcast channels. Leave us a review if you're on Apple. Jump on the Facebook page. It's the Unstoppable Dad Project. Instagram at the Unstoppable Dad. And the video version of this podcast will be up on YouTube as well. So subscribe on there to be notified when a new episode drops. So thank you very much. Have a great week. We'll see you soon. Bye.